So Sanjay works in the Centre for Interdisciplinary Methodologies at Warwick. His research examines technologies of racism from critical data justice perspectives, decolonial and abolitionist perspectives. And this approach explores the socio-technical production of race and how neo-materialist understandings of digital ecologies enable rethinking the contemporary force of techno-racisms and whiteness. And as I say, he's published quite a lot on this. There's a publication that's forthcoming this year, Understanding Digital Racism, Networks, Algorithms and Scale. And then he published something this year with NIJA, Post-Racial Politics, Preemption and In/Security. So Sanjay, your title is AI Racist? Over to you.
Okay, thank you for the kind introduction. I'll just do the screen sharing thing. Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen. Okay, so it's great to be part of this event. Hello, everyone. I should admit that the title for my presentation is a bit of a provocation and probably borderline clickbait, because it's actually quite limiting to only ask the question, is AI racist? And I'm not going to give you a sort of straight answer. Instead, I'm going to subject you to a 15-minute polemic, possibly, and I hope that's okay. Before sort of focusing on AI, I want to just very quickly map how technology has been thought about by indicating three positions. This echoes actually Gurnham's, what he initially said, and I'll just go through it very quickly. Firstly, the idea that technology is neutral, which what matters is how we use it. Secondly, a quite famous quote by Kranzberg, where he says technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. And that tends to be the one that people kind of articulate. So it's a third position by Langdon Winner that I draw on. Technology isn't neutral, it has a politics. And this helps us to raise certain kinds of questions like, how is technology designed and developed? What values are embedded in this technology? And which kinds of systems or assemblages is AI part of? Now, many commentators argue that AI is aligned with big tech, corporate capitalist wealth accumulation, and for enhancing state control, and there's many examples of this. So I think it's more challenging to explore the techno-racial politics of AI. I said at the start, it's limiting to ask the question, is AI racist? And this is because it risks essentializing our understanding of racism. And it's important to look at racism as a shifting, relational, biopolitical force of violence, as indicated by these two, I think, fairly well-known quotes by Stammen Shower and Ruth Wilson Gilmore. And I particularly want us to think about the second quote. Okay, when looking at the history of racial oppression, it's been deeply entangled with technology. And again, Gurnham touched on this in his talk. I'm going to do something really simple here. So, let's think about the technological development of ships, navigation, maps, and weapons as integral to imperialism and colonialism, or medical instruments and advances in statistics, which are used today in deep learning, for instance. They originally legitimized eugenics and racial science, and continue to do so. And more recently, how predictive AI is using policing to target racialized communities. While mainstream discussions about AI and race highlight harms of discrimination, I don't think it says enough about the intersections of digital technologies with transformations in race. And that's what I briefly want to touch on here with this table, which I won't have really a lot of time to go into. But what I try to do is to schematically periodize different racial modalities from the colonial, post-colonial, to what we can call the post-racial. Now, these racial modalities should be read as accumulative. So the contemporary post-racial moment carries with it these earlier racial formations. Now, my interest is in the post-racial. The way I'm thinking of it here is how race is predicated not only on biology and culture, but also computation, where racism is mutating from an embodied difference to a datafied object. We could say that AI is a race-making technology, so it mobilizes racial logics. It's a kind of racism that is, we could say, emergent. It's not easy to anticipate or obviate. And from a post-racial perspective, it's a racism rendered as anomalous, aberrant, or displaced. So with this in mind, I'm going to try to move on to unpack some of the racial technopolitics of AI. While we're all talking about AI, it actually remains poorly defined. One of the aspects of it, it's got this magical and mysterious quality and all sorts of powers are attached to it. And because of this, fantasies and fears are projected onto AI, as illustrated by these two quotes. Does anyone know who said these? I'm not sure if I can actually see the chat, but I'll let you put your answers in. The two of the richest white men on the planet, tech billionaires Bezos and Musk, seem to hold oppositional views about AI. One extols the virtues of AI, while the other sort of fears some aspects of it. But they do share a kind of hyperbolic belief in the transformative power of AI. And over the last decade, a combination of increasing computing power with developments in algorithms, especially deep learning, with big data, as well as massive corporate funding, this has led to advances in applied machine learning. Basically, these AI systems can learn from data and replacing earlier rule-based sort of pre-programmed systems. Now, most current AI is involved in classifying objects and making recommendations or predictions, and these are mainly trained by supervised machine learning, which relies on labeled data. And the so-called generative AI can also involve reinforcement and unsupervised machine learning, where it finds patterns and relationships in unlabeled or unstructured data. And what's supposedly innovative about generative AI, such as ChatGPT, is its capacity to produce novel and creative outputs. Though the hyperbolic belief in the power of generative AI is overdetermining a kind of AI benefits versus harms discourse. And that's been played out in all sorts of different ways. I'll just focus on two positions, a kind of dystopian AI in comparison to an ethical AI. Now, AI machines ending humanity is a new fear, but recently it's been triggered by the rapid development of generative AI. Some commentators believe that it's a precursor to what's called artificial general intelligence, AGI, where AGI will learn autonomously and be able to operate in any situation. And if AGI continues to evolve, the fear is it will lead to an AI superintelligence, which will impose an existential threat to humanity. Now, this AI doomsday scenario isn't a fringe concern. You may be familiar with a recent open letter that called to pause giant AI experiments. And this letter's received, I think, over 25,000 signatures to date, and including Musk, as well as other leading researchers from Google, Meta, and Microsoft. And part of the letter, it says some useful things, but part of the letter alarms us about the dangers of AI, as you can see from the quote, about losing control of our civilization, etc. But this kind of perspective hasn't escaped criticism. Researchers such as Emily Bender maintain that the risks and harms of AI actually don't stem from it becoming too powerful. Rather, she says, it's about the concentration of power in the hands of people, about reproducing systems of oppression. And what's notable about the open letter is it also fails to consider the discriminatory impacts of current AI technologies on existing vulnerable groups. As I'm sure you know, these automating decision-making systems have been embedded in finance, welfare, education, criminal justice, and border security. they've been affecting marginalized populations by entrenching inequalities and exclusions. It's actually not accidental that the open letter inadequately addresses current harms caused by AI. The letters, if you know, is published by the Future Life Institute, an organization funded by tech billionaires, including Musk. And what's less known is the kind of insidious ideology of long-termism that influences the Future Life Institute. I'm going to simplify a very complex argument here, but I'll give it a go. Long-termism is about ensuring the existence of enhanced future humans, and it's at the cost of addressing more immediate concerns, even for something like climate change. Now, for centuries, people of color have endured forms of technological oppression. They're considered biopolitically disposable because long-termism ignores existing harms. Long-termism also has connections with transhumanism, which aims to quote, use advanced technologies to create a superior race of radically enhanced posthumans. And yes, transhumanism has roots in racialized ideologies of eugenics. Also, Syed Mustafa Ali, and I'm going to simplify his arguments here, he highlights that transhumanism is a techno-scientific response by whiteness to the phenomena of white crisis. And this contemporary white crisis is animated by the threat of an apocalyptic AI that will end global white supremacy. So to put it simply, AI dystopia is the fear that a superior white future will cease to exist. Okay, so a second way that the benefits versus harms discourse is played out is less fantastical. It's expressed in terms of an ethical or responsible AI. Now, notions of ethical AI have been hijacked by big tech. It's become framed by a neoliberal ideology of techno-solutionism. This is the belief that tech, especially AI, can solve our complex real-world problems, and that there's an ethical trade-off to be had. There are possible harms caused by AI, but ultimately it's a technology that leads to social progress. Ethical AI is presented in terms of ensuring the fairness, accountability, and transparency of digital technologies. So it sounds good, but actually addressing these concerns is hardly straightforward. How do we establish algorithmic fairness in an existing unjust society? How do we make proprietary systems owned by big tech accountable to public scrutiny? And how do we make AI systems transparent when their inner workings operate as opaque black boxes? The problem is that techno-solutionism promotes technical fixes instead of addressing the social complexity of harms caused by AI. Now, this is the diagram of it's a diagram of a machine learning pipeline. And you can see it doesn't represent everything, but yet it's still pretty complicated. From how data is generated, then using it to train the algorithm to produce a model, and then deploying the model. And in terms of the authors, Suresh and Gutag, they kind of highlight a number of possible harms throughout the system. I wouldn't actually call them harms, I'll call them systemic forms of violence, but anyway. But I think their model's very useful because they do argue that it's not possible to simply expunge racism from the system because it's not simply a technical problem to be solved. Now, in the case of OpenAI, the company behind developing ChatGPT is putting what's called guardrails to reduce bias and the possibility of harmful outputs. This involves cleaning data, applying filtering, and content moderation. Now, much of this is proprietary and hidden. There's no real accountability or transparency in what they've done, and they're deciding what's fair and what's not fair. Now, one of the advantages of ChatGPT over previous systems is applying what's called reinforcement learning with human feedback. So you put humans in the loop, which helps train the AI to improve its output by moderating harmful content. But what's left out is how AI openly exploited and traumatized Kenyan workers from the global south, but not only paying them hardly anything, but also subjecting them to having to filter horrific content scraped from the web. We can also think of guardrails as kind of trying to patch up a system that's actually already toxic and discriminatory by design. Now, OpenAI publicly acknowledge that potential harms that their technologies can cause downstream. Yet, like most big tech, they pursue the Silicon Valley mantra of technological disruption, move fast and break things. And we know what continues to get broken are the lives of marginalized groups. Consider for a moment the school to prison pipeline, which is structured by systemic forms of oppression and racism. I don't think this can be simply fixed by AI. In fact, by inserting AI into an already unjust social system, it can further legitimize these systems and compound inequalities. And probably policing is the best example here. Furthermore, AI is developing its own rationalities based on values of efficiency and optimization that are opaque to scrutiny. And this can result in new and unanticipated modes of oppression emerging. There's been a failure to locate AI in wider infrastructures of racialized power and biopolitical control. And that's why we need to rethink the ethical politics of AI. This is where I'll end on. So what if we take an abolitionist perspective? Now, abolitionism isn't simply a destructive. Its goal, as Angela Davis points out, is to radically rebuild an alternative, more equitable future for everyone. And as Kaluri insists, we should ask the question, how can AI shift asymmetries of power? And I would add, which values and norms are encoded in AI assemblages? Does the pursuit of optimization, prediction, or even creativity support the dismantling of systemic racism? If we are going to use AI, we need to begin by developing AI that centers the interests of those that are marginalized and the most exploited in society. Thank you for listening.